The great hall of the Galactic Council floated in space like a crystal bubble. It spun slowly around a neutron star, using the star's energy to power its shields. Inside the hall, 12 different alien races sat in their special chairs. Each chair was made for a different type of body. Some aliens needed water to breathe. Others were made of pure energy. A few looked like giant insects. Today they were talking about humans. The human request sat on the main table like a piece of garbage. Nobody wanted to touch. Ambassador Krellanox from the Zephyrian Empire looked at the papers with disgust. His body was made of blue light that shifted and moved like flames. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind through metal pipes. These creatures want to join our council, Krellanox said. His light body flickered with anger. They have been in space for only 200 years. My people have traveled between stars for 50,000 years. The other aliens nodded. Ambassador Vexthal from the Hegemony clicked his forearms together. He looked like a giant mantis with silver skin. His large black eyes reflected the light from the neutron star outside. I have read their files, he said. They still use chemical rockets to move small ships. Their biggest warships are only 2 kilometers long. They power them with antimatter, which we stopped using 10,000 years ago. A laugh came from the water section of the hall. Ambassador Glubrex floated in a tank of purple liquid. She was from the Aquatic Federation and looked like a jellyfish with too many tentacles. They mine asteroids by blowing them up with explosives, she said. The liquid around her bubbled with her laughter. My children play with more advanced tools than these humans use for their biggest projects. The insect-like Kithara delegate stood up on her 6 legs. Queen Voice Zixara was 3 meters tall and covered in golden armor that was actually part of her body. When she spoke, her voice came from speakers built into her chest because her mouth was too alien for others to understand. The data shows they have spread to 47 star systems, Zixara said. This is normal for a young species. But they build their colonies in strange places. Many are in empty space between stars where there are no planets or resources. This shows poor planning and waste of energy. Ambassador Thielwyn from the Ethereal Collective made a sound like singing glass. His body was transparent and filled with moving lights. Perhaps they are simply confused about how to build proper colonies. Young species often make such mistakes. They will learn better methods in time. The debate continued for 3 hours. Each alien race took turns explaining why humans were not ready to join the council. The crystalline mind said humans thought too slowly. The energy beings said humans were too tied to physical matter. The machine intelligence said human technology was like toys compared to real science. Finally, Supreme Coordinator Dalthex called for order. He was from the First People, the oldest race in the galaxy. His species looked almost human, but with gray skin and large black eyes. They had been in space longer than any other race and helped start the Galactic Council millions of years ago. We have heard all arguments, Dalthex said. His voice was quiet, but everyone listened. Now we must vote. All in favor of accepting the human petition for council membership. Silence filled the hall. Not one hand, tentacle, or appendage was raised. All opposed? Every delegate raised their vote. The decision was clear and final. The human petition is denied, Dalthex announced. They will be classified as a developing species under Protocol 7. A quarantine boundary will be established around their current territory. They may not expand beyond this boundary until they prove they are ready for contact with advanced civilizations. Ambassador Vexthal stood up and walked to the communication panel. His silver claws clicked against the controls as he prepared the message that would be sent to Earth. I will make the announcement simple so they can understand it, he said. The other aliens laughed. Even the serious ones like Dalthex smiled a little. The idea that these primitive humans might one day challenge the great powers of the galaxy was amusing to think about. Tell them to develop their technology for another 1,000 years, suggested Krellanox. Perhaps by then they will discover How to manipulate gravity or energy in useful ways? 1,000 years might not be enough, said Queen Voice Sixara. My people needed 3,000 years to develop from chemical rockets to our current bioships. Humans may need even longer since they seem to waste so much effort on pointless projects. The message was sent within an hour. It traveled faster than light through the Council's communication network, reaching Earth in just a few minutes. The human leaders would read it and understand their place in the galaxy. They were children playing with dangerous toys, and the adults had decided they needed more time to grow up. But the real decision was about more than just membership. Supreme Coordinator Dalthex called a private meeting with the military commanders after the main session ended. Admiral Thane of the Council Defense Force attended by hologram from his flagship. He was from the hegemony like Vexthal, but bigger and covered in battle scars. The quarantine must be enforced, Dalthex said. These humans have a history of violence and rapid expansion. Their own planet shows signs of terrible wars in their recent past. We cannot let such aggressive tendencies spread to other star systems. Admiral Thane's image flickered as he checked his fleet positions. I've already moved 300 capital ships to the quarantine boundary. Each ship is capable of destroying a planet if needed. The humans will not be able to leave their assigned space without us knowing immediately. Good, said Dalthex. But remember, we are not trying to destroy them. They may become useful allies in a few thousand years if they learn wisdom. The quarantine is for their protection as much as ours. The meeting ended, and the aliens went back to their normal business. The galaxy was a big place with many problems. There were the Void Devourers in the Outer Rim, ancient machines that ate dark matter and left dead space behind them. The Psionic Collective was having a civil war that might spread to other sectors. Several star systems were dealing with reality storms that made faster-than-light travel impossible. Humans were the least important problem the Council faced. They were just another young species that needed time to grow up. The galaxy had seen thousands of such species over millions of years. Most eventually became useful members of galactic civilization. A few destroyed themselves. Some, like humans, just needed patient guidance and firm boundaries. Admiral Thane returned to his flagship and gave orders to his fleet. The ships spread out along the boundary of human space like a fence. Each ship was a biological construct grown rather than built, shaped like a giant sea creature with weapons that could crack moons. The crews were volunteers from many different species, all trained to watch for signs of human expansion. Set up the monitoring stations, Admiral Thane ordered. I want to know every time a human ship moves between their star systems. If they try to cross the boundary, disable their engines and send them back. Do not harm them unless they attack. First, but make sure they understand the boundary is real. The monitoring stations were placed in empty space around human territory. They used advanced sensors to watch for ships, energy signatures, and communication signals. The technology was so advanced that humans would never detect it. To human eyes, the boundary of their space would look completely empty. Over the following weeks, the stations began sending reports. Human ships were moving between their colonies as expected. The energy signatures matched the files perfectly. Chemical rockets for small ships, fusion drives for medium ships, and antimatter engines for their largest vessels. Everything was exactly as primitive as the Council had predicted. They are following normal development patterns, Admiral Thane reported to his superiors. Slow expansion, resource gathering, no attempts to cross the boundary. They seem to have accepted their situation. This was good news for the Council. It meant the humans were reasonable enough to understand when they were outmatched. It also meant they might eventually become useful allies instead of a threat that needed to be eliminated. The galaxy continued its normal routine. The Council met every month to discuss problems and make decisions. The quarantine around human space became just another item on a long list of things the military had to monitor. After a few months, most Council members forgot that humans existed at all. Only the monitoring stations continued to watch. Their automated systems recorded every human ship movement, every energy pulse, every radio transmission. The data was stored in vast databases that few beings ever looked at. As long as humans stayed in their assigned space and continued to develop slowly, there was no reason for anyone to pay attention to them. The galaxy was peaceful, at least in the sectors controlled by the Council. The great alien civilizations continued their ancient work of exploring space, developing new technologies and maintaining order among the younger species. Humans were just one small part of a much larger picture, a minor species quarantined in a small corner of space while they learned to behave like civilized beings. None of the great powers suspected that anything unusual was happening in human space. The monitoring stations reported normal activity, and normal activity was all anyone expected from such a primitive species. The idea that humans might be developing technologies beyond Council understanding was impossible to consider. After all, what could a species with only 200 years of spaceflight possibly discover that civilizations with millions of years of experience had missed? 50 years passed since the Galactic Council had quarantined human space. Admiral Thane still commanded the defense fleet that watched the boundary. He was older now, his silver skin marked with more scars from battles in other parts of the galaxy, but the human boundary had been quiet for so long that most of his attention went to other threats. The monitoring stations sent their reports every day. Human ships moved between their star systems in predictable patterns. Trade vessels carried goods from one colony to another. Passenger ships brought people to new worlds. Military ships patrolled their territory but never came close to the boundary. Everything looked normal for a developing species. "The humans are expanding exactly as we predicted," Admiral Thane told his aide, Commander Ythal. Ythal was an ethereal, her transparent body floating beside his command chair. Lights moved through her like slow lightning as she processed information. "They now control 93 star systems," Ythal reported. "Their population has grown to over 400 billion across all their colonies. They have built 17 major shipyards and countless mining operations." Admiral Thane nodded, standard growth pattern for a quarantined species. "They are using their time wisely to develop their territory instead of trying to break out and cause trouble." The reports showed that humans had built many space stations. Some were research facilities where they studied science. Others were manufacturing centers that built ships and equipment. A few were military bases that protected important star systems. All of this was normal behavior that the Council expected, but there were some strange details in the reports that nobody paid much attention to. Humans built many of their facilities in empty space between star systems. The monitoring stations recorded these construction projects but marked them as inefficient resource use. Why build something where there were no planets or asteroids to mine? "They are still using the same primitive technologies," Commander Ythal observed. "Chemical rockets, fusion drives, antimatter engines. Their energy signatures have not changed in 50 years. This was seen as proof that humans were developing slowly and safely. Fast technological growth was often dangerous for young species. Many had destroyed themselves by advancing too quickly without wisdom to control their power. The fact that humans were taking their time was actually good news. Admiral Thane reviewed the detailed sensor data from the monitoring stations. Human ships still moved at the same speeds they had 50 years ago. Their weapons were still kinetic, projectiles and energy beams powered by fusion reactors. Their largest warships were still only a few kilometers long. Nothing had changed except the number of ships and colonies. "Continue standard monitoring," Admiral Thane ordered. "The humans are not a threat? Focus our main attention on the Void Devourers in Sector 97. The Void Devourers were a much bigger problem than quarantined humans. These ancient machines had appeared at the edge of the galaxy and were eating their way inward. They consumed dark matter somehow, leaving behind regions of space where reality itself seemed broken. 3 star systems had already been destroyed, their matter simply vanishing as if it had never existed. Council scientists could not understand how the Void Devourers worked. The machines were older than any known civilization and used technologies that made no sense. They moved through space without engines, manipulated matter without tools, and communicated in ways that hurt the minds of those who tried to listen. "We need every available ship to stop them," Admiral Thane told his fleet commanders during their weekly meeting. "The humans can wait. They have been quiet for 50 years and will probably stay quiet for 50 more. The galaxy had many other problems besides the Void Devourers. The Psionic Collective was splitting into warring factions that attacked each other with weapons made of pure thought. The crystalline minds had discovered something in deep space that made them go silent for months at a time. Reality storms were appearing in several sectors, making faster-than-light travel impossible and cutting off entire civilizations. With so many crises happening, the Council barely thought about humans anymore. The quarterly reports about human space were filed away without being read. As long as the monitoring stations showed normal activity, nobody cared what the humans were doing inside their quarantine zone. But the monitoring stations were not as perfect as the Council believed. They were designed to watch for known technologies and energy signatures. When human ships used fusion drives, the stations detected them perfectly. When humans built space stations with normal power sources, every detail was recorded. However, the stations had trouble with things they were not programmed to recognize. Strange gravitational fluctuations in empty space were marked as natural phenomena. Unusual patterns in background radiation were ignored as sensor noise. Areas where space itself seemed slightly bent were explained as effects from nearby stars. Deep in human space, things were happening that the monitoring stations could not understand. In the void between star systems, where humans had built those supposedly inefficient facilities, the fabric of space was being changed in ways that Council science had never imagined. Dr. Yeleneth was the Council's greatest expert on space physics. Her crystalline body contained a brain that had been calculating stellar mechanics for 10,000 years. She reviewed the data from human space every year as part of her research into reality storms and other space anomalies. "There are some unusual readings from the quarantine zone," she told her research team. "Gravitational waves that do not match any known source. Dark matter density variations that seem too regular to be natural. Background radiation patterns that appear artificial." Her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Keftile, examined the data with his energy-based senses. Could the humans be causing these effects with their primitive technology? Dr. Yeleneth's crystal body flashed with the equivalent of laughter. "Impossible. These readings suggest manipulation of dark matter and dark energy on enormous scales. Humans barely understand normal matter. They could not possibly affect the 95% of the universe made of dark components." The strange readings were filed away as unexplained natural phenomena. After all, space was full of things that science did not yet understand. The galaxy was ancient and vast, containing mysteries that even the oldest civilizations had not solved. A few odd sensor readings from human space were not worth investigating, when there were so many more important problems to deal with. Meanwhile, human merchant ships continued their regular routes between colonies. The monitoring stations tracked every vessel and recorded every energy signature. The ships looked exactly the same as they had 50 years ago. They moved at the same speeds, used the same power sources, and carried the same types of cargo. What the monitoring stations did not detect were the modifications hidden inside those familiar ships. Human engineers had learned to hide advanced systems behind facades of primitive technology. New engines that bent space-time were wrapped in fusion reactor housings. Navigation computers that used dark matter calculations were disguised as simple stellar positioning systems. The humans had also learned to communicate in ways the monitoring stations could not intercept. Messages were encoded in gravitational wave patterns that looked like natural cosmic background noise. Information was passed through quantum entanglement networks that operated faster than light without creating detectable energy signatures. Captain Sarah Chun of the merchant vessel Longshot made her regular run between Earth and the Proxima Centauri colonies. To outside observers, her ship looked like a standard human freighter with fusion engines and chemical maneuvering thrusters. The monitoring stations recorded her passage and filed it under routine commercial traffic. But Captain Chen's ship was not what it appeared to be. Hidden beneath its ordinary hull were systems that could manipulate dark matter, bend space-time, and tap into energy sources that Council science considered impossible. The cargo she carried was not just manufactured goods and food supplies. It was also equipment for projects that were changing the very structure of space in human territory. Another successful run, Captain Chun reported to her hidden contacts. The message was sent through quantum channels that the monitoring stations could not detect. The new facility in the Ross 128 system is operational. Dark matter density has been increased by a factor of 10,000 in the construction zone. Similar reports came from hundreds of other human ships making regular trips throughout their territory. Each carried hidden technology and secret cargo. Each contributed to projects that were reshaping space itself in ways the Council had never imagined possible. The humans had learned something during their 50 years of isolation. When the galaxy's greatest powers looked down on you as primitive and harmless, they stopped paying close attention to what you were really doing. They saw what they expected to see and ignored everything else as impossible. Admiral Thane received his monthly report about human space and glanced at it briefly before filing it away. Still no change in human activity, he noted with satisfaction. They continued to develop at a safe and steady pace. No attempts to break quarantine or develop dangerous technologies. He had no idea that human space was no longer just a collection of star systems with planets and space stations. The void between the stars had been filled with structures made of dark matter and held together by controlled gravitational fields. Installations the size of gas giants hung invisible in empty space, processing dark energy and building machines from the fabric of space-time itself. The humans had spent 50 years learning about the 95% of the universe that most species ignored. While the Council focused on normal matter and energy, humans had discovered how to work with dark matter and dark energy. They had built a civilization that existed mostly in the hidden parts of reality that conventional sensors could not detect. But they were careful to maintain the illusion of primitive technology. Their visible ships and stations still used familiar energy sources and moved at predictable speeds. Their communications still used radio waves and laser transmissions that the monitoring stations could intercept. Their colonies still looked like normal settlements on planets and asteroids. The deception was perfect because it gave the Council exactly what they expected to see. A young species developing slowly and staying within their assigned boundaries. Primitive humans who knew their place in the galaxy and were content to build their small civilization in the space they had been given. Nobody suspected that humanity had been using their time of isolation to become something unprecedented in galactic history. They were building a civilization based on technologies that the Council's greatest scientists considered impossible. They were preparing for the day when they would no longer need to hide behind primitive facades. But for now, they waited and built and learned. The galaxy thought they were children playing with simple toys. Soon, the galaxy would discover what those children had really been doing during their 50 years of quiet development. The emergency alarm rang through the Galactic Council chambers like a scream. Supreme Coordinator Dalthex had not heard this sound in over 300 years. It meant something terrible was happening across multiple sectors at the same time. He rushed to the main hall where other council members were already gathering in panic. Ambassador Krelinox flickered into the chamber, his energy body crackling with fear. "My colonies in the outer spiral are gone," he announced. "Not destroyed, gone. They were there yesterday, and today there is nothing but empty space." Queen Voice 6 clicked her claws together nervously. "The same has happened to 3 of my hive worlds. Our monitoring stations detected massive gravitational distortions, then silence. When our scout ships arrived, they found empty space where planets used to be. More reports flooded in as representatives from across the galaxy shared similar stories. Entire star systems had experienced impossible phenomena. Planets had vanished without trace. Space itself seemed to be bending and twisting in ways that broke the laws of physics. Most disturbing of all, the attacks were happening simultaneously. Across distances of tens of thousands of light years, Fleet, Admiral Zexstar of the Hegemony military appeared as a hologram in the center of the chamber. His silver skin was pale with fear and his forearms shook as he presented the data. "We have confirmed attacks in 47 different sectors," he reported. "The pattern is always the same. Massive gravitational anomalies appear from nowhere. Reality becomes unstable, then everything returns to normal except the targets are simply gone." Dalthek studied the star map showing the affected areas. Red marks indicated where attacks had occurred. The pattern seemed random at first, but something about it bothered him. "Show me the timeline," he ordered. The holographic display changed to show when each attack had happened. Dalthek's ancient mind, trained by millions of years of experience, immediately saw what others had missed. "These are not random attacks," he said quietly. "They are coordinated. Whatever is doing this can strike anywhere in the galaxy at exactly the same time." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. No known technology could achieve instant communication across such vast distances. Even the Council's fastest ships needed weeks to travel between the attacked sectors. Yet somehow, an unknown force had launched perfectly timed strikes across half the galaxy. Dr. Yelenith materialized in her designated space, her crystalline body flashing with urgent calculations. "I have analyzed the gravitational data from 17 attack sites," she announced. "The readings are impossible according to everything we know about physics. Someone is manipulating dark matter and dark energy on scales we believed were purely theoretical." Ambassador Glubrex rose from her water tank, tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Could this be the work of the Void Devourers? They consume dark matter somehow." "No," Dr. Yelenith replied immediately. "The Void Devourers leave areas of dead space where reality breaks down. These attacks show precise control over space-time itself. Whoever is doing this understands dark matter physics better than our greatest scientists." The debate continued for hours as the Council tried to understand what they were facing. Theories were proposed and dismissed. The energy being suggested it might be a natural phenomenon, but the coordination argued against that. The machine intelligence calculated that no known species had the technology for such attacks. The psionic collective wondered if it could be a new form of mental warfare, but the physical effects were too real. Then the transmission arrived. It came through every communication network in the galaxy simultaneously. Radio waves, quantum entanglement, channels, gravitational wave transmitters, even the organic neural networks used by bioships. Every device capable of receiving information suddenly carried the same signal from the same source. The source coordinates made the Council chamber fall completely silent. The transmission was coming from Sol System, the home of the quarantined humans. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Dark Fleet," the voice said. It spoke in perfect translation to every language in the galaxy, somehow knowing exactly how to communicate with each species. "You have 72 standard hours to lift the quarantine around human space and formally recognize humanity's sovereignty over all territories we have claimed." The image that accompanied the voice showed a human female in military uniform, standing on what appeared to be a ship's bridge. Behind her, large windows showed the familiar sight of space filled with stars. But something was wrong with the view. The stars were too bright, too close, and arranged in patterns that made no sense. "We have been patient during our 50 years of isolation," Admiral Chun continued. "We used that time to study the universe and develop technologies that you apparently overlooked. We have tried to remain peaceful, but your refusal to recognize our rights has forced us to take action." Ambassador Vexthal stood up in rage, his mantis-like body trembling. "Impossible! Humans do not have the technology for galaxy-wide communication. Their most advanced ships barely reach 1% of light speed." Admiral Chun seemed to hear him, though that should have been impossible during a one-way transmission. She smiled slightly. Your monitoring stations have been watching our old technology for 50 years. We kept using those primitive ships and power sources because we knew you were watching. But we also learned to build things you could not see. The transmission changed to show views from across human space. But these were not the familiar colonies and space stations that the monitoring reports had described. Instead, the images showed structures that defied understanding. Vast constructs made of invisible material filled the void between stars. Ships the size of moons moved without visible engines. Space itself seemed to be folded and shaped like clay in the hands of a sculptor. Dark matter and dark energy make up 95% of the universe, Admiral Chun explained. Your species have spent millions of years playing with the tiny fraction of reality made of normal matter. We spent 50 years learning to work with the rest of it. Dr. Yelenis. Crystalline body flashed rapidly as her mind tried to process what she was seeing. Those structures are impossible, she whispered. Dark matter cannot be manipulated directly. It barely interacts with normal matter at all. You thought it was impossible because you tried to manipulate dark matter using normal matter tools. Admiral Chung replied, again seeming to respond to words she should not have been able to hear. We learned to build tools from dark matter itself. Once you can work with the fabric of space-time directly, many things become possible. The images continued to show impossible sights. Human facilities that existed in folded space, occupying the same location as normal space but somehow separate from it. Weapons that fired concentrated gravity waves capable of erasing matter from existence. Ships that moved by rewriting the laws of physics around themselves. Your attacks on our colonies were demonstrations, Dalthex said, his voice barely audible. He had finally understood what was happening. Admiral Chun nodded. We removed several small installations from normal spacetime and stored them safely in folded dimensions. No one was harmed, but we wanted to show you what we are capable of. The colonies can be returned to normal space whenever we choose. But the coordination across such vast distances, Fleet Admiral Zexstar protested. Dark matter exists everywhere, Admiral Chun explained patiently. When you learn to work with it properly, distance becomes irrelevant. We can communicate instantly across the entire galaxy and beyond. We can strike anywhere at any time. We can make entire star systems disappear and bring them back at will. The council chamber erupted in frightened voices as representatives realized the implications. Humanity had not just developed new technology during their quarantine. They had apparently transcended the physical limitations that bound every other species in the galaxy. What do you want? Dalthex asked when order was finally restored. Recognition, Admiral Chun said simply. We want the quarantine lifted immediately. We want formal acknowledgement of human sovereignty over the space we have claimed. And we want to be treated as equals, not as primitive children who need supervision. And if we refuse? Ambassador Krellinox demanded, his energy body blazing with anger. Admiral Chun's expression became cold. Then you will discover exactly how much of the galaxy we have already claimed while you were not paying attention. The empty space between your star systems is not as empty as you think. We have been building there for 50 years. She gestured to the windows behind her, and the view changed to show the interior of what she called her flagship. The council representatives gasped as they realized the scale of what they were seeing. The bridge was not inside a ship. It was built into space itself, with the orbits of planets serving as corridors and the asteroid belts as defensive positions. This is our latest flagship, Admiral Chun said with pride. We call it Sol. It used to be a star system, but we found better uses for it. The dark matter density here is now 10,000 times normal. Every cubic meter of space contains machinery you cannot see and weapons you cannot imagine. The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. For several minutes, no one spoke. The greatest powers in the galaxy had just been threatened by a species they had dismissed as primitive children 50 years ago. Finally, Ambassador Vexthal found his voice. This must be some kind of trick. Humans cannot possibly have such. Technology. Our monitoring stations would have detected it. Your monitoring stations have been detecting exactly what we wanted them to detect, came another voice. This time it was transmitted directly through the quantum communication networks in the council chamber itself, proving that human technology could reach anywhere they chose. Dr. Yeloneth ran calculations frantically, trying to understand how any of this was possible. If they can manipulate dark matter as they claim, she said slowly, then they have access to energy sources beyond our comprehension. Dark energy is what drives the expansion of the universe itself. If they can control that force, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Everyone in the chamber understood the implication. A species that could control dark energy could reshape reality itself. They could make stars, destroy galaxies, or rewrite the laws of physics on a whim. 72 hours, Dalthex repeated quietly. They have given us 72 hours to decide. The emergency session began immediately. Messages were sent to every member species, every fleet commander, every scientific institution in the galaxy. The greatest minds in known space were called upon to analyze the human claims and determine if they were real. But deep down, every council member already knew the truth. The coordinated attacks, the galaxy-wide communication, the impossible technology they had been shown, it was all real. Humanity had somehow become the most powerful force in the galaxy while everyone was looking the other way. The quarantine that was supposed to contain them had instead given them time to develop in secret. The monitoring that was supposed to watch their every move had failed completely. And now the children that the council had dismissed as harmless were holding a gun to the galaxy's head. The countdown had begun. In 72 hours, the council would have to decide whether to accept humanity as an equal power or face the consequences of their 50 years of arrogance. For the first time in galactic history, the mighty council was not making demands. They were being given an ultimatum by the species they had looked down upon for so long. And everyone in that chamber knew they had no choice but to accept. Admiral Thane had commanded the Council Defense Fleet for over 200 years. He had fought against space pirates, alien invaders, and cosmic disasters, but he had never faced an enemy that claimed to control the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The human ultimatum felt like a bad joke that had gone too far. "Prepare the fleet for immediate departure," he ordered his bridge crew. "We are going to Sol System to end this madness before it spreads." His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, was a masterpiece of Council military engineering. The bioorganic vessel was grown rather than built, its living hull capable of healing damage and adapting to new threats. At 15 kilometers long, it was one of the largest warships ever created. Its weapons could crack planets and its shields could absorb the energy of a supernova dot behind the Eternal Dominion, 499. Other capital ships prepared for the journey to human space. Each one represented millions of years of accumulated knowledge and technology. The combined fleet had enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems if necessary. "The humans have somehow developed impressive illusion technology," Admiral Thane told his commanders during the final briefing. "They want us to believe they can manipulate dark matter and control gravity itself, but we know this is impossible. No species has ever learned to work with dark forces directly." Captain Veltar of the bioship Void Hunter nodded agreement. His crystalline body reflected the lights of the holographic display. "Our scientists have studied dark matter for millions of years. It barely interacts with normal matter at all. The idea that primitive humans could learn to control it in 50 years is absurd." The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel and headed toward Sol System. The journey would take 3 days at maximum speed. During that time, Admiral Thane reviewed every piece of data about human technology and capabilities. Nothing he saw suggested they were capable of the feats they claimed. "Their largest ships are still only 2 kilometers long," he noted while studying the intelligence reports. "Their weapons are still kinetic projectiles and energy beams. Their power sources are still fusion and antimatter reactors. Everything matches the data from 50 years ago. Commander Yeathal floated beside his command chair, her ethereal body pulsing with information processing. The monitoring stations confirm no change in human technology signatures. Whatever they are doing to create these illusions, they are using their old equipment to do it. This made Admiral Thane feel more confident about the coming confrontation. Humans might have learned some new tricks with holographic projections and communication networks, but they could not change the basic laws of physics. When faced with real military power, their deceptions would crumble quickly. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol system and immediately began scanning for human defenses. What they found was exactly what the monitoring stations had been reporting for 50 years. Human colonies on the planets, space stations orbiting the major worlds, and civilian traffic moving between them on predictable schedules. I see merchant ships, passenger vessels, and a few patrol craft, reported the sensor officer. Nothing that could threaten even our smallest escort ships. The human military appears to be hiding behind their planets. Admiral Thane studied the tactical display with growing confusion. Where was the mighty dark fleet that Admiral Chun had boasted about? Where were the impossible weapons and reality-bending technology? All he could see were the same primitive human settlements that had existed for decades. Begin scanning for hidden installations, he ordered. The humans must be using stealth technology to hide their real military assets. The fleet's sensors probed deeper into the system, looking for concealed bases or cloaked ships. The most advanced detection systems in the galaxy searched every cubic meter of space around Sol, but they found nothing unusual except for some strange background readings that did not match any known technology. Sir, we are detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations throughout the system, the science officer reported. The patterns are too regular to be natural, but they do not match any known artificial sources either. Admiral Thane frowned at the data. The gravitational readings were indeed strange, but they were also very subtle. Whatever was causing them was either very far away or very well hidden. Continue scanning, and send a message to the human leadership demanding their immediate surrender. The message was transmitted on standard radio frequencies toward Earth. Within minutes, a reply came back from Admiral Sarah Chun herself. Her image appeared on the main screen, showing her standing in what looked like a normal ship's bridge. "Welcome to Sol System, Admiral Thane," she said with a slight smile. "I hope you enjoyed your journey here. It will probably be your last trip anywhere if you continue on your current course." "Enough of these games," Admiral Thane replied angrily. "We have 500 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your primitive vessels cannot possibly threaten us. Surrender now, and we will allow your species to continue existing under proper supervision." Admiral Chun's smile grew wider. "Primitive vessels? Is that what you think you're seeing?" She gestured to something off-screen and the view behind. Her changed dramatically. Instead of a normal bridge, the display now showed Admiral Chun standing in what appeared to be an enormous command center. Through transparent walls, Admiral Thane could see the curve of planetary orbits and the distant glow of the sun. The scale was impossible. The bridge seemed to be embedded in space itself, using entire planets as reference points. "You are currently inside our newest flagship," Admiral Chun explained calmly. "We call it Sol, after the star that used to power this system. That star still exists, but it now serves as the primary reactor for our defensive grid." Admiral Thane's sensor officer suddenly spoke up in a panicked voice. "Sir, the gravitational readings are changing. The fluctuations are getting stronger and more organized. It's almost like the space around us is ... moving." "That's because it is moving," Admiral Chun said, somehow hearing the report despite the fact that human technology should not have been able to intercept Council communications. "You see, when you learn to work with dark matter properly, you realize that empty space is not really empty at all. It's full of invisible infrastructure that conventional sensors cannot detect." The tactical display on Admiral Thane's ship began showing impossible readings. Space itself seemed to be bending and twisting around the fleet. Gravitational fields that had no visible source were pulling at his ships from multiple directions. The background radiation was forming patterns that looked almost like circuit diagrams spanning the entire solar system. "This is impossible," Admiral Thane muttered. "Space cannot be manipulated like this. You would need energy sources comparable to entire stars." "We have energy sources comparable to entire galaxies," Admiral Chun replied matter-of-factly. "Dark energy drives the expansion of the universe itself. When you learn to tap into that force, stellar-level power becomes trivial to generate." Suddenly, something appeared on the tactical sensors that made Admiral Thane's blood freeze in his veins. Ships were materializing around his fleet, not approaching from a distance, but simply coming into existence from apparently empty space. They were enormous, dwarfing even the largest council vessels. Some were the size of small moons, their hulls seeming to be made of crystallized space-time itself. "Where did they come from?" Admiral Thane demanded of his sensor operators. "Unknown, sir. They were not there a moment ago, and now they are. Our sensors show no energy signatures, no propulsion systems, no power sources. It's as if they are made of the vacuum of space itself." More ships continued to appear until Admiral Thane's fleet was completely surrounded. The human vessels did not look like anything in council records. Their hulls were transparent in some places and mirror-bright in others. Parts of them seemed to exist in normal space while other sections flickered in and out of visibility as if they were only partially real. "These are impossible ships," Admiral Thane said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing this large could be built or powered with any known technology." "You keep using that word impossible," Admiral Chun observed. "But you are looking at the ships with your own sensors. How can something be impossible if it is clearly happening right in front of you?" Admiral Thane tried to regain his composure. Even if the humans had somehow built these massive vessels, they were still outnumbered. His fleet had 500 ships, while he could only count about 50 human vessels on his sensors. "You may have impressive ships, but we still outnumber you 10 to 1, he declared. "Our combined firepower can destroy anything you have built." "Numbers only matter if you understand what you are counting," Admiral Chun replied. "You are counting ships that exist in normal space-time. But what if I told you that each of our vessels exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously? What if a single ship can attack you from a dozen different locations at once?" As she spoke, the human ships began to demonstrate capabilities that shattered Admiral Thane's understanding of physics. Individual vessels split into multiple copies of themselves, each copy attacking from a different angle. Others seemed to fold space around themselves, making it impossible to determine their actual location or size. "Sir, our targeting systems cannot lock onto them," the weapons officer reported in panic. "Every time we try to aim at one of their ships, it appears to be in a different place than our sensors indicate. Some of them seem to be occupying the same space as multiple different objects at once." The demonstration continued as human weapons came online. But these were not the familiar energy beams and kinetic projectiles that Council technology used. Instead, the human ships fired concentrated gravitational waves that erased matter from existence. They launched missiles made of folded spacetime that could pass through shields as if they did not exist. Some weapons seemed to attack the past, causing damage before they were even fired. "Your shields and armor are designed to protect against normal matter and energy," Admiral Chun explained as the impossible weapons fire continued around the Council fleet without actually hitting them. "But we are not using normal matter and energy anymore. We are attacking you with the fundamental forces that hold reality together." Admiral Thane watched in horror as his tactical displays showed the true scope of what they were facing. The human vessels were not just larger than Council ships, they existed on scales that made comparison meaningless. Some appeared to be built into the structure of space itself, using entire star systems as components. Others seemed to exist in multiple universes at once, their weapons firing from dimensions that Council science had never even theorized about. "This is your final warning," Admiral Chun said. her voice now coming from every speaker on every ship in the Council fleet simultaneously. Leave our space immediately and return to the Council with our demands. We are willing to coexist peacefully with other species, but we will not be quarantined or controlled by anyone. And if we refuse? Admiral Thane asked, though he already knew his fleet was completely outmatched. Then you will discover what happens when a species that controls dark matter decides to stop being patient. Admiral Chun replied, we can make your ships, your crews, and your entire civilization disappear as easily as we made our colonies vanish during our demonstration. The choice is yours. Admiral Thane looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Every one of them showed the same expression of terrified understanding. They were not facing a primitive species with impressive illusions. They were confronting a civilization that had transcended the normal laws of physics and gained power over the fundamental forces of existence itself. The humans had spent 50 years in isolation learning to manipulate the 95% of the universe that other species could not even detect. While the Council played with normal matter and energy, humanity had mastered dark matter and dark energy. They had built a civilization that existed mostly in the hidden dimensions of reality, invisible to conventional sensors but capable of reaching into normal space whenever they chose. Recall all ships, Admiral Thane ordered quietly. We are returning to Council space immediately. But sir, our orders were based on the assumption that we were dealing with a primitive species. Admiral Thane interrupted. We were wrong. We were completely, catastrophically wrong. As the Council fleet began its retreat, Admiral Chun's image appeared one final time on their screens. Thank you for being reasonable, Admiral Thane. We look forward to productive negotiations with the Council once our terms have been accepted. The human ships faded back into invisibility as mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving the Council fleet alone with the terrifying knowledge that they had just encountered a species that made their most advanced technology look like primitive tools. Admiral Thane's report to the Council would be brief and to the point. Humanity was no longer a developing species in need of quarantine. They had become the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, and everyone else was now living in their shadow. The Galactic Council chambers had never been so quiet. Every representative sat in their designated spaces, but no one spoke. The holographic display in the center showed Admiral Thane's defeated fleet limping back toward Council space. Behind them, human space looked exactly the same as it had 50 years ago: peaceful colonies, civilian traffic, and no sign of the impossible weapons that had just humiliated the galaxy's greatest military force. Supreme, Coordinator Dalthex broke the silence first. His ancient voice carried the weight of millions of years of galactic leadership, but now it sounded tired and uncertain. Admiral Thane's report has been verified by all 500 ship commanders in his fleet. The humans possess technology that exceeds our understanding of physics. Ambassador Vexthal shifted nervously in his chair, his mantis-like body trembling. How is this possible? Our monitoring stations showed no change in human capabilities for 50 years. They still use the same primitive ships and power sources they had when we quarantined them. Because we were watching the wrong things, Dr. Yelena admitted. Her crystalline body flashed with embarrassed calculations. We monitored normal matter and energy while they learned to work with dark matter and dark energy. We were like children, watching shadows on a wall while missing the real world around us. Queen Voice Ixara clicked her claws together in frustration. Our greatest scientists spent millions of years trying to understand dark matter. How could a species with only 200 years of spaceflight succeed where we failed? Perhaps that is exactly why they succeeded, Dalthex replied thoughtfully. We assumed dark matter was impossible to manipulate because our ancestors could not do it. The humans had no such assumptions. They approached the problem with fresh minds and no preconceptions about what was impossible. The debate continued for hours, but everyone knew the real question was not how humans had achieved their impossible technology. The question was what the Council would do about it. The 72-hour deadline was approaching rapidly, and humanity had already demonstrated they could destroy any military force sent against them. Ambassador, Krelonox flickered with angry energy. We cannot simply surrender to these upstart primitives. The Council has maintained order in this galaxy for millions of years. If we bow to human demands, every other species will think they can challenge our authority. What authority? Ambassador, Glubrex asked from her water tank. The humans just proved that all our military power is worthless against their technology. They can make our ships disappear with weapons we cannot even detect. How do we maintain authority over beings who can rewrite the laws of physics? The question hung in the air like a poisonous gas. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was faced with a species that was not just more advanced than them, but so far beyond their understanding that resistance seemed futile. Then the second human transmission arrived. This time, Admiral Sarah Chun did not wait for Council permission to speak. Her image simply appeared in the chamber's communication systems, bypassing every security protocol as if they did not exist. Behind her, the impossible vista of space folded into geometric patterns showed that she was still commanding from within the Sol system itself. "Greetings, Council members," she said with polite formality. "I hope you have had time to consider our terms. As a gesture of good faith, we have returned Admiral Thane's fleet undamaged to your space. We could have easily destroyed every ship, but we prefer to resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than violence." Dalthex stepped forward to respond. "Admiral Chun, the Council acknowledges that humanity possesses advanced technology. We are prepared to discuss the terms of your membership in galactic civilization." Admiral Chun smiled, but the expression was not entirely friendly. "I appreciate the diplomatic language, Coordinator Dalthex, but let me be clear about our position. We are not asking to join your civilization. We are informing you that we have already built our own civilization, and we expect you to respect our sovereignty within it." She gestured to something off-screen, and the display behind her changed to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Huge sections were highlighted in blue, indicating areas claimed by humanity. The Council representatives gasped as they realized the scope of what they were seeing. "These are the territories that humanity now claims as our sovereign space," Admiral Chun explained. "As you can see, they include not just the star systems where we have visible colonies, but also the vast regions of apparently empty space between those systems." Ambassador Vexthal stood up in shock. "Those empty regions cover nearly 30% of the galaxy. There is nothing there but vacuum and cosmic dust." "There is nothing there that your sensors can detect," Admiral Chun corrected. "But as we have learned, conventional sensors only show you the 5% of the universe made of normal matter. The other 95% is quite busy with human activity." The map zoomed in to show details of human-claimed space. What had appeared to be empty void was revealed to be filled with structures that defied imagination. Dark matter installations the size of solar systems connected by transportation networks that span thousands of light years. Cities built from crystallized spacetime floated in the void between stars. Industrial complexes that processed dark energy on scales that dwarfed entire civilizations. "We have been expanding for 50 years, Admiral Chun continued. "Not just to new planets, but into dimensions of reality that your species never learned to access. We have built infrastructure in folded space, established colonies in parallel dimensions, and created transportation networks that exist outside normal spacetime." Dr. Yelenis's crystalline body flashed rapidly as she tried to process the implications. If you can manipulate spacetime itself, then distance and travel time become meaningless. You could reach any point in the galaxy instantly. "We can reach any point in any galaxy instantly," Admiral Chun confirmed. "Dark energy exists everywhere in the universe. Once you learn to work with it properly, the entire cosmos becomes your neighborhood." The Council representatives sat in stunned silence as they realized that humanity had not just become more advanced than them. They had transcended the normal limitations of physical existence itself. While other species were confined to moving between stars at the speed of light, humans could step between dimensions and travel anywhere in the universe at will. What do you want from us? Dalthex asked quietly. Recognition and respect, Admiral. Chun replied. We want the quarantine lifted immediately. We want formal acknowledgement that human-claimed space is sovereign territory. And we want to establish peaceful diplomatic relations with any species that is willing to treat us as equals. And if species refuse to recognize your claims? Queen voice. Zixara asked nervously. Admiral Chun's expression became cold. Then they will discover what happens when they try to interfere with human operations in human space. We prefer peace, but we are fully prepared to defend our interests with whatever force is necessary. To demonstrate her point, she gestured again, and the galactic map changed to show the locations of major Council military bases and fleets. Every installation was marked with a targeting indicator, showing that humanity could strike anywhere they chose with perfect accuracy. Your monitoring systems never detected our expansion because we built most of our infrastructure in dimensions that your science considers impossible, Admiral Chun explained. But that same infrastructure gives us the ability to project power anywhere in normal space whenever we need to. Every Council world, every military base, every important installation is currently within range of our defensive systems. The threat was clear, but it was delivered with such calm professionalism that it somehow seemed even more terrifying. Humanity was not making angry demands or issuing emotional ultimatums. They were simply stating facts about their capabilities and their intentions. We have prepared a formal treaty for your consideration, Admiral Chun continued. A document appeared on every Council member's personal display, written in perfect translation for each species. The terms are simple. You recognize our sovereignty. Over claimed territories, you cease all attempts to monitor or interfere with human activities, and you establish normal diplomatic relations with the Terran Confederation. Dalthex reviewed the treaty quickly. The terms were surprisingly reasonable for a species that could dictate whatever they wanted. Humanity was not demanding tribute or submission. They were not trying to conquer other species or expand into occupied territories. They simply wanted to be left alone to develop their civilization in peace. In return, Admiral Chun added, we offer to share some of our knowledge with species that prove themselves trustworthy. We have learned much about the universe during our 50 years of isolation, and we believe that knowledge should eventually benefit all intelligent life. The offer was tempting, but several Council members remained skeptical. Ambassador Krylonix's energy body flickered with suspicion. How do we know you will honor this treaty? You have the power to destroy us all. What prevents you from simply taking whatever you want? Because we are not conquerors, Admiral Chun replied firmly. We are explorers and builders. We spent 50 years learning to work with the universe instead of fighting against it. We prefer cooperation to conflict whenever possible. She paused and looked directly at each Council member in turn. But make no mistake, we will defend ourselves if attacked. We will protect our people if threatened. And we will enforce our territorial claims if they are violated. We have been patient for 50 years, but our patience has limits. The treaty vote was held immediately. There was no real debate because everyone understood the situation. Humanity had become the dominant power in the galaxy whether the Council liked it or not. The only choice was whether to accept this reality peacefully or face the consequences of resistance. The vote was unanimous. Every species, even those that harbored resentment about the sudden change in galactic power balance, recognized that opposition was futile. The treaty was signed with ceremonial formality, but everyone knew it was really a surrender document. Thank you for your wisdom, Admiral Chun said when the signing was complete. The Terran Confederation looks forward to peaceful relations with all Council species. We hope this marks the beginning of a new era of cooperation and mutual understanding. The transmission ended, leaving the Council members alone with their thoughts. In the space of 72 hours, their ancient civilization had been relegated to secondary status by a species they had dismissed as primitive children. But as the shock wore off, some Council members began to see opportunities in the new situation. Humanity offered to share their knowledge with trustworthy species. The chance to learn about dark matter manipulation and dimensional technology was worth more than wounded pride. Ambassador Glubrex was the first to speak after Admiral Chun's transmission ended. Perhaps this change is not entirely negative. We have been stagnant for millions of years, using the same technologies and following the same patterns. The humans may force us to grow and develop in ways we never considered. Or they may eliminate us if we prove inconvenient, Ambassador Vexthel replied darkly. Then we must prove ourselves convenient, Dalthex said with finality. The age of council dominance is over. The age of human leadership has begun. We can either adapt to this new reality or be left behind by species that do. Over the following weeks, the galaxy began to adjust to its new reality. The quarantine around human space was lifted with great ceremony. Diplomatic missions were established between humanity and various council species. Trade agreements were negotiated for technologies and resources that both sides could benefit from. But everyone understood the real situation. Humanity had not joined galactic civilization. They had conquered it without firing a shot. They had achieved dominance not through military force, but by transcending the physical limitations that bound everyone else. The age of human galactic supremacy had begun not with invasion or conquest, but with the quiet realization that while other species had been playing politics with the 5% of the universe they could see, humanity had claimed ownership of the 95% that remained invisible. The galaxy would never be the same again. And in the depths of space, in dimensions that conventional science could not detect, human civilization continued to grow and expand into realms of possibility that no other species had ever imagined. The children that the council had dismissed as primitive had become the adults who now shaped the destiny of the entire galaxy.